to lose weight. Last time I was thin was when I was in the military and ran 10 miles 3 times a week and worked out at the gym 4 hours a day. You know, that's the only way. But now I've had 5 or 6 broken ankles and reconstructive knee surgery. So running or swimming or anything like that is quite uncomfortable. So I did, a couple months ago, I did do no sugar, no carbs for 10 days, and my body did not like that. I had 3 kidney stones and shingles from the shock that it did to my body. So I'm kind of like, all right, there's got to be a way to do this without going through that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Then we have Pat and Lexi.
Hi.
Troy.
Hi.
For Lexi. And her pride and joy is also like her enabler.
Okay.
I'm a stress eater, so she tends to do well by herself, but she also needs the support. And like generally I try, but because I'm a stress eater, I just prefer to eat what I want when I want. So, you know, she actually did lose like a lot of weight, but she's kind of been falling off. And so I'm actually going to be trying to get on it like really strict. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I fall off and I binge for a couple days, it's like I eat everything that I haven't eaten, you know, sugar.
Do you take the orange prime after you're done binging?
No.
Okay. All right. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Can you move the water bottles because I can't see who's talking?
Here.
Thank
Okay.
you. Okay.
Can you see now?
Yep.
So anyway, so I'm back. I've been binging for a few days. Over the holiday, I've been binging. A month.
Since my birthday in June, right?
It's amazing how that inflammation just comes
Yeah,
right
it
back.
does.
Oh, yeah. 2 days.
So what? So did you say your name? What was your name again? I'm sorry.
Pat.
Pat. So what does that? What does that tell you about the food?
Oh, I feel like crap. I mean,
It should tell you that it's not real. It's not really food. That's what I want.
Real food. Yeah.
It's just poison.
Yeah.
I started on the bone broth diet too. A couple of years ago, I lost about 35 pounds on that. But it doesn't matter what I go on. I always end up going back. And
Yeah.
it goes up
I have some thoughts about that, but I'm just waiting to hear everyone's story. So I might say things that might sound a bit controversial tonight, actually, but maybe it'll shake things up. So we'll see.
Yeah. Bakings are good.
We like it when
Okay. Okay.
Next we have Courtney.
All right.
Hi, Troy. I'm Courtney. I'm down here shaking. Can't wait for you to shake some things up. I lost almost 40 pounds last year. And I did it under really, I don't want to say strict, but I had a lot of things I had to do in order to do it. So I did keto, but I was breastfeeding at the time. And I had a child who was allergic to milk, so I couldn't consume dairy. So, but I did well. At the time I started, I was working from home. So as pardon me, my phone is ringing. I'm sorry about that. So then I went to work. I started a job in July, and I think I was only down about 15 pounds when I started the job. So I lost the second half after starting the job. The job got stressful. I did well through, I want to say, Thanksgiving. And I've basically been binging on and off since Thanksgiving. Yeah, and so part of the reason, in addition to the stress from the job, there was also stress on the home front, and we found out since that point that the baby is also allergic to soy, in addition to dairy, and eggs, and peanuts, and tree nuts. So my challenge is I'm having to try to cook 2 to 3 meals. And, are you not able to hear?
I can't see you. The camera's moving this way.
You gotta hold it. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Go ahead. Okay.
I'm gonna actually move this down there, so because you guys are more new to this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We'll miss him, but
So
we'll
part
manage.
of my challenge is trying to meal prep for myself, because that's how I'm successful. If I can meal prep, then I'm fine. That's how I did it before. But now I've got one child who's rebelling against keto. Mommy, that's good for you, but I don't want any keto, my 7-year-old. And then I have my 2-year-old who he can't eat anything else that anyone else is eating. So it's been hard for me trying to get back into the rhythm that works well for me and for my family. That's the challenge for me. Like, they're out of town right now, so I fasted all day. This is the first thing I've eaten today. I'm doing great. They get back tomorrow. I don't know what's gonna happen. So I don't know if I'm able to get these answers from this meeting or either any other, because I know my issues are specific, but I'm really looking for family-friendly, keto-friendly meals that don't include my baby's allergens, and it's just been difficult to do.
Sure. Okay. That's good to know. I'll see how I can help with that if I have. I'm sure I can think of a few things, but I don't know what everyone likes to eat, so that's different.
That's all the new ones. The rest are old veterans.
Okay.
But they're
All
here
right.
they're struggling. So Troy, I'm gonna move you down the other end, sweetheart. Okay, hold on, because I yeah, I'll just turn this chair around. Okay. All right. And I'm gonna need, Wendy, can I just use your phone and stick that right here?
I put it on silence.
Shannon, do you need another one?
Can you see all right now, Troy, or
Yes.
you can? Okay, I'm gonna turn this down. Okay, go ahead, sweetie, you're on.
All right. So for the new people, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Troy. I am Karen's son. The reason why I guess I'm talking right now is because I'm the one who taught my mom how to do a lot of this stuff originally, and based on some success that I was having. And if there's anything you know about me, is I can't just do something without understanding why it works. So I'm like a very curious person. So when I get into something, I just dive deep into it and I read it constantly. And so when I first started this January 2nd of last year, I told myself that I would learn one thing a day for like indefinitely. And so far I have done that, at least one thing a day. So that's been good. Either about nutrition, longevity, or health, or different things like that. So I've been able to do that. And I've been pretty successful with it. Like I said, I lost almost 100 pounds. I was about close to 250, and like right now I weigh 152. Give you an example. That was last year. But it's not so much about weight as it is about, my body fat has gone down from like 43% to like 17, that fast. So it's been, and I did almost all of it without exercising. So I recently started exercise this year, and I'm actually doing it to put on muscle, not really lose weight. So it's a little different strategy. So some of the things that have benefited from me are I had really bad sleep apnea. That's gone. I used to have to use a mask to even function, a sleep apnea mask. I don't have to do that anymore. I have completely cured of that. I used to have very bad back pain where I couldn't stand for more than like half an hour at a time. That's gone. I haven't taken any medication since I started. In fact, that actually went before I lost any weight. So that was very good. That was the main catalyst for me even doing this, was my back pain, because I was in such pain all the time. So that was a benefit. I used to struggle with depression a lot. That's gone. I have had a lot of mental benefits. I have a long list of like benefits I've gotten from this way of eating, but the main ones are obviously body composition changes, mood changes, pain reduction. The sleep apnea is gone. I used to have really bad acid reflux and GERD. That's gone. I barely even have any gas at all anymore. But I changed what I ate from last year to this year quite a bit, so I can talk about that even while keto. So this is kind of a long journey for me. The first 6 months I did keto, I didn't do any intermittent fasting at all. And then I started doing intermittent fasting, and I've done a couple longer fasts, 3 or 4 days. I've done that like twice in the last year and a half. So I have some experience with that if you're curious. But that's not super long. That's just a few days. So that's a little bit about me. I'm not saying I know everything. In fact, I definitely don't know everything, but I'm not going to tell you that I do know everything. And something I don't know, I will just tell you I don't know. So I won't beat around the bush. So, but whatever I do know, I will tell you the best of my knowledge. So, okay. All right. So, questions. Where should we start?
Well, you were gonna say some new things you've been doing.
Yeah, the new things you've been doing?
Well, I had a shift in my mindset about the ketogenic diet in the sense of why we do it. Like what I mean is, by the book Keto, which is that 80% fat, 20% protein, 5% carbs or less, or those macros. I think those can be beneficial when you're first starting. So if you are first starting, I think there's nothing wrong with doing those things because it can kind of teach you how to eat a high fat, low carb diet. And it makes you feel full when you eat that way, which is always good because if you feel hungry, you're going to obviously be more primed to eat junk food, particularly. So there's nothing wrong with that, but I think after a while, I don't think it's necessary. In fact, I think it's bad to do those kind of macros for the long term. Restricting too much protein, I don't think it's a good idea. So that's something that I've changed from last year. There's never been a point in human history where somebody would intentionally restrict protein on purpose. That has never happened in like the history of mankind. So I don't think it's necessarily a good idea. Not that you only eat protein. I'm just saying I wouldn't worry about, oh, I'm eating 20% protein versus 30%. I really wouldn't worry about it. That's fun. Also, the idea of being kicked out of ketosis because of eating too much protein is a bit nonsense. That's one thing I've learned.
Roy, that's a myth?
Total myth, yes.
Oh,
Yeah. Yes. And even if you were to be kicked out of ketosis, it would be so temporary that it just wouldn't matter. It doesn't really matter. Yeah. As long as you're not eating carbohydrates, that's the key. In the absence of carbohydrates. So I'm talking about if you eat I would say on average, my daily carbohydrate intake is less than 10 grams a day. Like, I mean, it's pretty low. And some days it's less than 5. So some days it's 0, to be honest with you. So
that net, or is that like total carbs?
Total, yeah. Well, now it wasn't like that last year, but I feel like I feel best when I eat that way. I'm the least hungry. I have the most energy. Now, when I first started, maybe I don't know if I could have done that right away, like, and still felt as good. But my body is so used to using fat as a fuel source that I just don't need any carbs. Like it's totally unnecessary, you know. So I'll explain a few things. So number one, your body cannot. There's 3 macronutrients, right? There's fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Your body cannot make its own protein, and it can't make its own fat. It can make its own carbs, which should tell you something. And one thing it tells you is that carbohydrates are not required to survive, actually, and in fact, they're not required to even be optimally healthy. So I can tell you as a personal anecdote, the less carbs I'm eating, the higher fat and protein content, I feel good. I have high energy levels. I can go long periods of time without eating and not be hungry. As soon as I start the trigger for me is sweeteners. This is something I learned this year. So even those keto sweeteners, they make me more hungry. They make me crave more junk. They make me crave more carbs. So I just decided, I'm not going to really normally eat those things. So that's been a big shift for me. And I'm just going to focus on, I created this little framework. I'll share it with you guys because I think a lot of things are really confusing to people out there. And so I wanted to create something that was pretty simple, but you would have to really understand the meaning behind why it's just a set of 4 principles to kind of live by. And that's what I've been testing this year on myself. And so I'll walk you through it, and then that'll kind of, you can ask me questions if you want and things like that. I named it after my grandfather, Gerald RUSK. So I'll share my screen with you guys. Tell me when you can see my screen. 1 second. Now, my grandfather is not a keto person, but can you see my screen?
Yes.
So this is my grandfather, Gerald. This is my wife, Sonia. This is from 4th of July. This just happened. So, so why did I name after my grandfather? Well, I thought it would be a nice thing to do. I was looking for an acronym, and I called it Relentless Uncovering of Scientific Knowledge. It's basically that the jury is out on a lot of the science, meaning a lot of nutritional science is not really science, and we can get into that if you want, but it's always about trying to uncover what the truth is about things and not settling for what just somebody tells us. So there's 4 principles. The first one is to avoid foods and activities that cause a negatively addicting dopamine response. So what does that mean? Well, see, you have this receptor in your brain called a dopamine receptor. And when you do something that is rewarding to your brain, it sends this dopamine chemical into your receptor, and your brain says, okay, I want more of that. So if you think about it from a historical perspective, if you were a hunter and gatherer, right, you would need to survive. What would you need to do? Well, you would need to procreate to extend the species, right? Mankind. In fact, it even mentions that in the Bible, I think, right? About in Genesis, about, what does it say? Be fruitful and multiply or something, right? Yeah. So you would need to do that for the survival of the human race. And for your own survival of your family, you would need to go maybe hunt an animal. You would have to do something. And you probably would go periods of time without eating, and then you would eat. And when you would eat, it would be a sense of reward, because the whole idea of chasing something, it takes a certain amount of skill. It takes an intense focus. You hunt an animal, if you think about it, especially before they had guns and everything, right? So you would actually get a reward system, like you would get a dopamine response from going out and hunting. You get a very strong dopamine response from sex. So all of these things that we call our brain's reward system sends off these dopamine responses. Well, in today's world, we get dopamine responses from many things, which I would call unnatural. And one of the main ones is sugar. So sugar has a very, very high dopamine response in your brain. In fact, it works on the same pathway as cocaine and heroin when it comes to your dopamine receptors. So it's highly addicting. And any sweetener actually has a dopamine response, just that sugar itself is more addicting. Things like pornography are extremely addictive to your brain. So you're talking about sweeteners, sugar, drugs, pornography, things that basically sitting on the internet all day, basically like looking through social media all day, you get these small dopamine responses constantly from a reward system. For example, if you post a picture and then people start liking your picture, you actually get a dopamine response from that, and it becomes addicting. There's a very, in the past, since the beginning of time, in order for you to get those dopamine responses, you would have to go do things to get that reward system. For example, when you exercise, you get a dopamine response. It's just nowhere near the same as eating a cake, right? Like, or watching pornography or something. It's not the same level. There's just different levels, right? But if you were not eating a bunch of sugar, which you probably wouldn't have been in the past, or watching internet pornography because it didn't exist, right? Or going on social media all day, you would have gotten dopamine responses from running or hunting or, spending time with your wife or husband or whatever, right? So you would have gotten these things and they would have been satisfactory for you. And when you achieve a goal in life, if you set a goal and achieve it, you get a dopamine response. Give an example, right? So there's positive and negative. So the principle of this is that you generally, it's not a rule, meaning it's not like you're never going to have a piece of sugar or you're never going to do something that, it's just that as a general principle, you tend to avoid foods and activities that cause a negatively addictive dopamine response. And the reason for that is because your reward system in your brain is essentially what controls your cravings. So every time you want to crave something sweet or you want junk food, it's because you're addicted because of these dopamine responses. It's an addiction. So it's more about understanding that this thing is not good for you, what you're consuming is not good for you. And if you're trying to lose weight or trying to lose body fat, consuming more food just on its own, overeating is not going to help you. It's only going to harm you. So even if you just overeat a bunch of, I don't know, it doesn't have to be bad food. It's just overeating in general is not good. So not that you can overeat one day or something, but I'm talking about if you're constantly craving food every single day, you're going to be overeating a lot, right? So you're not meant to overeat. I mean, it's unnatural actually to overeat. So basically that's the first principle. So what are things I've been doing? Well, generally I don't consume any sweeteners anymore. That's one thing. I definitely don't eat sugar. What I will do is I will only eat those things at a date. What I will say, I will allow myself to eat that thing for a day, or maybe two if it's like a weekend. Other than that, I just stick to 100% I don't eat it. So that's what I do. It's really helped me with my cravings, with my hunger, with my ability to fully control my appetite, with my discipline. Makes things a lot easier in life, with that kind of things. Other things I've done, so I don't really, I don't do any drugs. I don't drink very much. I don't watch any pornography. I pretty much try to abstain from, I don't gamble much at all, really. So I try to abstain from these things which cause these negative dopamine releases. Yeah, sometimes social media, sometimes the internet. I mean, it's not like perfect, obviously, but it's just a principle to live by. So that's the first principle. So for foods, you're talking about obviously processed foods, sweetened, sugar, number one, and also things that are highly sweetened. So those are some examples. So number two is eat mainly highly bioavailable, nutrient-dense foods and avoid polyunsaturated cooking oils. So that means that when I do eat, I'm going to eat foods that have high nutrient density and are highly bioavailable. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of foods on paper have a lot of vitamins, but that doesn't mean your body absorbs them. There's something called bioavailability of the vitamins. So an example is vitamin A. So there's two forms of vitamin A. There's, I can show you an example of this, and I can send a link to this website, which talks about bioavailability and nutrient density, and they basically break all these forms down. So what does that mean? Well, if you think you're getting a lot of nutrition, but your body's not absorbing it, you're going to be more hungry because your body is going to be asking you for the nutrients, but you're thinking you're getting them, right? So a lot of this is about eating a natural way of eating, what I would consider natural, which kind of fixes your hunger. It fixes your cravings. That's what you want to do. So you don't have to worry about fighting it all the time, you know? So that's that. So for give an example about bioavailability. So carrots have a lot of vitamin A, but some people actually don't have a gene which can even convert the beta carotene in carrots to vitamin A. Some people there's a gene that you need to convert that. Some people don't even have it, number one. Number two is that people who do have it, on average, people convert about 1/21 of the vitamin A. And so in order to get, and my mom can tell you this because she used to juice carrots a lot. In order to absorb the vitamin A in the carrots, you pretty much have to juice them in high concentrations, right? So because of that, meaning if you're only absorbing on average 1/21 of what's on paper on the vitamin A, that food is actually not. It might be nutrient dense in vitamin A on paper, but it's not because it's not bioavailable to you. So the animal form of vitamin A is called retinol. I'm giving you an example of vitamin A because it's just one example. I'm not going to go through them all, but it's called retinol, and that is 100% bioavailable to all human beings. So when you eat a piece of liver, if you like that, I don't, but if you were to eat a piece of liver, which is high in vitamin A, your body would absorb all of that, and you wouldn't have to deal with 121 or not having that gene or anything. So that's an example of bioavailability. Things like pea protein versus animal protein, right? So pea protein is 50% bioavailable compared to red meat protein, to give an example, or protein in eggs or whatever. So what I do is I try to focus when I do eat on foods that are highly nutrient dense, bioavailable in shorter windows of eating, meaning I try to do that intermittent fasting. And that goes to that principle number 3, which is to live a low insulin lifestyle, which means that you don't eat foods that spike your insulin, like carbs basically, or sugar. And you also don't, and you also do some form of fasting, whether that's your 16-hour fast, sometimes 18, 24, whether it's you do a 3-day fast once in a while. But you don't sit there and eat 6 times a day, because every time you eat, you do raise your insulin somewhat. So it's about a lot of, and the last one is focus on sleep quality over quantity. You can be getting 8 hours of sleep, but it can be 8 hours of crap sleep. And I would say sleep might be more important than all these things. So it's the critical, because your body burns a lot of fat when you sleep. So if you're trying to lose body fat, that's a key. And it does all of its repair work when you sleep. So most of it. So it's really critical. So what do I mean by that? Well, consuming caffeine at nighttime, which you might be doing right now, by the way. Different things like that. Even though you can fall asleep, they actually affect your sleep patterns. So it's about learning what affects your sleep patterns and trying to regulate that. And so I try to not consume caffeine like 10 hours before I go to bed, is one example. I try to cut that. That's one thing I changed. So I put it in my framework. So it's just basically 4 little principles to live by. I don't have to count calories, macros, anything. When I live by these things, I've been doing it this year. I'm getting really good results. My discipline has gone way up. I can do things which I thought I could never do before, like take cold showers. I can do all kinds of stuff now, which is like, I was surprised that I never used to be able to do. I can work out a lot more now. Like my workout regimens are way more than they used to be. I'm very disciplined about it. And there's not even exercise part of these 4 principles, but I'm not saying don't exercise. It's just, I don't have that much experience with it, so I didn't put it in there. And
Troy. Yeah. Hey, Troy. Can you explain why you would take cold showers?
Oh, well, cold showers serve 2 purposes. So cold showers actually increase your metabolic rate, and they actually can help you burn fat, because the cold, you have 2 forms of fat. You have visceral fat and adipose tissue fat. And the visceral fat is the fat around your organs. And everyone has a certain amount. It's just natural to have that. But some people have too much. And when you have too much, you get like fatty liver. That's one example, fatty liver disease. So you don't want that. But when you burn fat, you actually will tend to burn your visceral fat first. So you will burn the fat around your organs first. It doesn't really burn, it just gets used for energy, but that's just term people use. And then what it does is it takes the adipose fat, and then it will tend to put it to your organ fat, visceral fat. So it's actually like you're moving fat from one place to another, and you might see yourself less fat in your clothes, but it's actually kind of taking it, because you need that fat around your organs to survive. So your body will tend to use that visceral fat first. People don't know that. So why do you do cold showers? Well, one thing is that have shown in some studies where people do this cold therapy and showers and baths and things like that, that it actually increases the rate of burning your visceral fat. That's one thing, which will then in turn make you lose more adipose fat. That's initially why I started it. Now, I said, hey, let me experiment with this, because who knows, I'll just try it. What I really got out of it, though, were other benefits which I didn't expect. Which is increased energy throughout the day. No longer needing to drink coffee. Like so much energy that I'm like wired. I just want to go work out. Like just crazy stuff. Discipline greatly increased. So like basically there's this concept of, I know you guys are, does everyone go to my mom's church here?
No.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't, but for the folks who do, or folks who are church-based, there's this kind of, and I could talk about it from a non-religious perspective too. I can talk about both. From a religious perspective, if you think about it, the story of Christ is this idea that the only way that you can get to, I'm using a metaphor simply, but the only way you can get to heaven is through suffering, right? So the concept is that, that true happiness through the metaphor is through this suffering. And that's why I think when Jesus was asking, like in his last prayer or whatever, that I think it was in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he was talking to God, he was asking about, do I really have to go through with this? Can I deal with it? And God was basically like, no, you have to endure this suffering in order for everyone to be able to go to heaven, right? So that's like kind of a simple premise in the Bible that Jesus, the Savior, said that in order to get to heaven, you have to suffer first, right? That's the concept. So there's a Greek, what do you call it? It's called Stoicism. It's from a Greek philosophers, and it's based around the same principle. Where there's a quote I love, which is that no trees, branches can grow to heaven without its roots first growing deeper into hell. So that it's the same concept as the Jesus stuff I'm talking about. Is that if you can, because if you think about it, when you're happy, right? A lot of times happiness comes on you, like it kind of happens on you. Like something will happen, you'll be happy, or you'll wake up happy one day, but you're not happy 24/7. Nobody is, right? It's just impossible. So it's not like happiness is this thing that always lasts forever. It's that happiness comes and goes, and your levels of happiness will come and go, right? It's really undeniable. And there's nothing wrong with that, because happiness is an emotion, and emotions change. But the idea is that we should, instead of striving for happiness, so people strive to be happy all the time because they think that that's what they need in life. So what do we do when we strive to be happy all the time? We seek easy pleasure. So we seek the thing that's going to give us the quick amount of happiness to solve all our stress or our unhappiness in life. So some of us binge eat, some of us eat a bunch of sugar, some of us, drink alcohol, some of us watch pornography. There's a lot of things that people do because they're very pleasurable things, which you can attain very quickly in modern society, right? But that actually doesn't equate to long-term happiness. And I can imagine if you've ever dealt with that, that because you're unhappy with the way you feel or the way you look or whatever. So that those things are hindering you, yet you continually do it. Right? So, and why? It's because they're easy. And so people seeking after happiness will immediately go after the most pleasurable thing, which usually is the thing that will hinder their long-term happiness, right? So so I'm just sharing you some things that I've been learning, right? So it's more about like things I'm trying to implement is that, hey, if I can make myself better than before I was yesterday, and if I can make myself better for myself, for my wife, for my family, that will ultimately make me a better person for society, right? If you think about it, right? Because if I'm a better person at home, I'm a better person at work, I'll probably be a better functioning adult in society, right? And that maybe I can help other people like I'm trying to do now. So the concept is that will be more sustainable happiness over time than always going after the short fix, right? Always going after the most pleasurable thing. So it's kind of a weird thing where by denying yourself short-term pleasures, you get a long-term sustained happiness. So that's the concept. So why cold showers? I'll be honest with you. When I wake up in the morning, the last thing I want to do is take a cold shower. But when I go in the shower and I turn the cold water on, whether it's at the beginning or not, I face that short-term resistance to pleasure, but when I come out of it, I feel like I can do anything. Like, so the concept is like, I'm always like, it's just one way of denying yourself short-term pleasure for better gain, for long-term gain. Because what you get out of it is you get a greater sense of discipline and self-confidence, right? That when I'm at work now, hey, I just took a cold shower and it really, really sucked. I can do anything. Like, it's like a really weird thing that I did not want to do this today. Like, everything in my brain told me not to do it. But because your brain is always trying to be comfortable, it always wants to be comfortable. But you can't grow if you're always comfortable.
Come on.
So like, it's just a way of, it first started off because I wanted to experiment with trying to burn more body fat. And then it turned into like, oh, I'm getting all these other life kind of benefits of confidence and energy. And then it becomes, yeah, I don't want to do it, but now I'm getting addicted to it because I like starting off every day with a win. It's like I'm facing a challenge every day and I'm winning immediately. So then when I have a craving, if I have a sugar craving or something, it becomes easy, right? Yes.
Question. Now, when you did it, did you just start off with freezing cold water, or did you gradually work into that?
I gradually worked into it. And if I'm being honest, full transparency, I don't always take 100% cold showers, not every day. I always say 2 days a week, I probably take 100% cold shower, meaning it's freezing when I get into it. That's the hardest one. Okay. But like what I'll do is on the other days, I'll get into it like lukewarm, and then I'll just turn it cold within a minute, and then it's freezing, but you can deal with it. But I would love to be able to get to a point where I don't have to do that ever. It's really difficult though. Like, especially if, I'll be honest with you, if I don't get a good night's sleep, and that's why that thing about focusing on sleep quality, if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm much less inclined to do it. It's like a weird thing where my sleep really impacts my ability to overcome the obstacles. I'll be honest with you, I noticed my sleep, one thing I learned this year, poor sleep will immediately lead me to more cravings the next day.
Wow.
Like sweet cravings immediately. Like I can see it A and B. In fact, Sunday night is the night I usually get the worst sleep because I have to wake up by 4 a.m. on Monday, right? So even if I go to bed early, sometimes I can't fall asleep. So I might get 5 hours of sleep and it just doesn't feel like it's enough, right? So I will tell myself on Mondays, you're probably gonna have cravings today. And I had to teach myself that because I would always struggle on Mondays a lot. Like, and for cravings for me was, I was trying to cut out sweeteners, period. Now I cut out the sugar. That wasn't a problem for me because I've been doing it so long. But even cutting out any sweeteners altogether, even the keto sweets or bars or the drinks or whatever, right? I wanted to cut that out for the whole dopamine thing. So I would even have those sweet cravings, keto sweet cravings on Mondays when I wouldn't have them other days. And I learned that was because of my sleep. So there's two things. One, I can focus on getting better sleep, which I am. And two is I can realize on Mondays, I'm likely to have cravings when other days I'm not, and just accept that. And then it's like, okay, I'm probably going to get a craving today. When I get it, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to give into it, or am I going to recognize that it's a craving and it's not really me being hungry? So one of the things I learned this year is the difference between being hungry and having a craving. And that's pretty important, I would say, for long-term success. So if you think you're hungry, ask yourself, could I eat a bunch of steak and eggs right now? And if the answer is no, you're not really hungry. Because like usually everyone, or steak or whatever food you like that's not sugar, right? Or carbs. So, or sweeteners. So maybe for you, it's avocados and broccoli. I don't know, right? For most people, it's a steak, right? Most people like steak. So if you say, hey, if I could go make myself steak right now or a hamburger, would I be satisfied? If the answer is no, you're just having a craving. Because if you're hungry, you would go eat the steak, realistically, right? That would be good enough to satisfy you if you're hungry. So it's really just a simple matter of identifying when you're having a craving versus when you're hungry, and then saying, I'm having a craving right now, and that's okay. And just dealing with that. And like something I'm working on this year, it's like, it's okay to have cravings because it's natural, because we've been addicted to this crap our whole life, because we've been told that it's okay to eat this stuff. So, and meanwhile, it's doing a number on your brain and your whole reward system and all that. So one thing is, it's not your fault that you're having a craving, and that's okay. And two is, it's okay to not give into the craving and realize that it's just a craving and that it will pass, because they always do if you don't give it. So, and what you can do is journal if you want. If you're having cravings, so write down, this is what I do. And I actually hired a coach this year to help me, someone that specializes in more addictions. And for me, it was these sweets, the keto sweets, any kind of sweeteners, right? So, and this is something she taught me was, hey, when you're having a craving, just write down what the craving is, what you're craving, how you're feeling right now emotionally, and what your emotions are about having that craving. So sometimes I would write down, hey, I'm having a craving for X. It's really strong right now. Last night, I noticed I didn't sleep very well. You know, I might note that down or something. Or maybe I ate this earlier today. I wonder if that's impacting you or not. And then, hey, I'm a little angry right now that I'm having a craving. Angry, why? Like, I am angry that I don't want to have the craving, but I am, and it's fine to be angry because it's just natural, right? And then eventually what happened was I stopped fighting the cravings and I just accepted them and just moved on. And then it takes some time. So my recommendation would be to journal, write down in your phone, write down on a piece of paper when you're having cravings, what your craving is, what you're craving, how you're feeling at the moment, and then move on. And that sounds hard, but trust me, if you start doing that every time, you start to look back and you say, number one, I was able to not give in to it, number one. Number two is you start looking back at your cravings and almost laughing like it's a joke. It's almost like a joke because your brain is trying to get you to do something which you know is not good for you. So it's like, it's not good for you because once you give into it, you're going to be more hungry, even if it's not sugar, even if it's a keto sweetener, right? So even something like keto sweeteners to me should be an occasional thing. That should be a cheat. Like, and if you're gonna, that should be not necessarily a cheat, but a treat, let's say, right? And if you're gonna eat sugar, do it when you feel confident that you can get through these cravings, because that might mean you have to go a few months without, right? To really get through this and feel confident that you can have sugar and not binge on it after a day or whatever. So that it's going to take time. And the reason why it's going to take time is because it's super addicting. So, I mean, and it's poison. There's no nutrition at all in that food at all. There's no nutrition in sugar. There's no nutrition in sugar substitutes, artificial sweeteners, nothing. It's just pleasure. It's just pleasure for your brain. So once you understand that, you realize that it's not real food. It's just a poison. And even, I mean, sugar itself is a poison. It's very toxic to your body. I'll give you an example. Your body can only hold in your blood about 1 teaspoon of sugar, which is about 5 grams, right? So at any given time, you roughly have 5 grams of sugar in your blood. If it goes over that, your body will do whatever it can to get rid of it. So whatever it can is, when you overconsume sugar, it's going to convert it into fat, right? And so it converts it into fat in your liver and it stores it as body fat, right? Or it will do whatever it takes. And the reason why it does whatever it can, your body will always use sugar as an energy source first because it's toxic. Because if you have too much of it, you will die. Simple as that, right? So you could eat a bunch of fat. You could sit there and eat a stick of butter and you're not going to die, okay? Like it's basically almost, your body can handle the fat. It has ways of handling it. If you overconsume fat, it's going to store it as fat as well. I'm not saying you cannot store fat. Sugar is the only way. That's not true. My point is that your body will always use the sugar first because sugar is a toxin in your body. So, and it can only maintain, think about that, 5 grams of sugar. You know how much 5 grams of sugar is? It's 1 packet of Domino sugar, right? Like 1 white packet. It's nothing. So, and that's your whole body. That's all it can store in the bloodstream. And if it gets over that, you will go into a coma and eventually die. So when people have diabetes, when their sugar gets crazy and all this stuff, that's when they get in trouble and they start losing limbs and everything else because it's super toxic. So what does that tell us about sugar and glucose is that your body can make its own. So you don't need to eat it. It's not required, unlike fat and proteins. So your body, there's a process. This is the last thing I'm going to say, then we'll go into questions. The process of creating new sugar, glucose is just a form of sugar, is called gluconeogenesis. Your liver creates it when you need it. And your body needs it all the time because you store sugar, glycogen, glucose in your muscles, right? You store it in your muscles. There's 5 grams in your blood, and your brain uses roughly anywhere from 75 to 85% of your energy from glucose, even when you are 100% ketogenic. I want you to think about that. So that means your brain is only using about 15 to 20 to 25% max-ish ketones, even when you're like super keto, okay? So how do you get that 75% glucose? Well, you don't have to eat it. Your liver makes it through gluconeogenesis. So your liver is making glucose all the time when you're on a ketogenic diet. So this idea about like, and guess what it makes it from? Not just protein, it makes it from fat. So people think that like gluconeogenesis is some bad thing. Actually, if you're in gluconeogenesis, you are likely burning fat because it can use your own body fat. So what it does is it goes to your adipose tissue, it goes to that visceral fat and uses that. So when your times you're not eating, right? Let's say you're doing a 16-hour fast, right? For example, and you're not eating any protein, your body's still going to go through gluconeogenesis. It's just going to use fat to convert to glucose because your brain needs the glucose. So my point is gluconeogenesis is not a bad thing. Don't be afraid of eating protein. Those are two things. Your body needs glucose, but it needs zero exogenously, meaning it needs zero to eat. Not that you can't eat it. If you want to eat vegetables, go ahead and eat vegetables. I'm not saying don't eat carbs. I'm just saying I wouldn't eat sugar and I wouldn't eat grains. Those are like the two main things. And when you do eat, try to eat mostly fat and protein-based foods and lowest carb possible. That's the kind of mindset I go with. And you also don't need to force feed yourself fat for like no reason. Meaning, just eat foods that are high fat, high protein foods, and you don't have to sit there and add a bunch of fat necessary. Like, there's no reason to do it. What I mean is, like, I wouldn't say, oh, I only had 80 grams of fat today, I need 20 more. No, I just eat highly bioavailable, nutritious food that's high in fat and protein. So what are those foods? Well, your meats are going to be fatty meats, right? Ribeyes, things like that, right? Maybe a lean cut of steak cooked in butter. That might be an example, right? Maybe some heavy cream in your coffee is one. That's like a natural thing. It's not like you forcing it down yourself, right? It's just you put some heavy cream in your coffee. One example. So vegetables that or fruit, like, so avocado is a high fat fruit, right? But that's fairly low carb, right? So that's an example. Coconut oil, that's a high fat thing. But that doesn't mean that you have to sit there and drink coconut oil all day either. It just means that like you could cook in coconut oil. If you want to have a bulletproof coffee with some MCT oil, 1 tablespoon in a day, that's okay. But I wouldn't stress about, like I have to eat so much fat all the time. Like nobody would have ever done that in history of man before we even knew what calories were, and people weren't even fat for most of the time, right? So it's just like people weren't eating 6 times a day. They weren't eating a ton of sugar and grains all the time. They were eating mostly animal-based foods, and the vegetables they would eat would be vegetables that were available to them in their climate at the time. They weren't shipping in, avocados from Australia and all these things. Like, we didn't have this type of availability of fruits and vegetables that we have now. Obviously, bananas in the middle of winter and all these things. So it's just really basically about, to me, the ultimate ketogenic diet is a diet that allows you to produce ketones naturally. Because if you think about it, ketones, yes, they have a lot of benefits, but they're really a byproduct of not eating carbs. So your body is going to make ketones, like, even if you don't really eat any fat at all. Now, I wouldn't suggest that because you're going to feel like crap mostly, because fat is very good for your brain and it's satiating. So I'm not suggesting don't eat fat. I'm just saying the creation of ketones is actually from the absence of carbohydrates, not because you just load yourself with a bunch of fat. Okay? So that's some of the things I would say. So I don't know if that confuses people more or simplifies things more. I don't know. And the last thing I'll say is about calories. Calories were invented or discovered, or whatever you want to call it, about 100 years ago. My question is, how did anyone ever avoid being overweight before 100 years ago? So if you think about it, right? Before we were counting calories, okay, which obviously for some people in the short term can work, meaning because you're just consuming less food. So it's like, obviously you're probably going to lose weight if you consume less food over time. But the thing is, calorie restriction long term doesn't mean long term weight loss. In fact, it can mean a weight gain, because what happens is when you long term restricted calories for too long, your body is going to down-regulate itself, meaning it will require less calories. So So people think, oh, I'm 180 pounds and have this much muscle, therefore I should eat this many calories a day, because that's what the bodybuilders do. Well, the thing about bodybuilders is they're lifting weights like 4 hours a day. They're taking a bunch of steroids most of the time, right? So yeah, they can probably, to a science, figure out, because they're lifting so much and they're breaking their muscles down so much, right, that they need the calories or whatever. Okay, but that's not 99% of the human population. And if you're not lifting weights 4 hours a day, that mindset is not going to apply to you. So that's one thing. Number two is there's a 7-year, they tried to prove, sorry, I know I said this is the last thing I'm going to say, but this is the last thing I'm going to say. We'll go to questions. They tried to prove the hypothesis that, eating saturated fat is bad for you, right? So which is total nonsense. So they tried to prove that in a study that cost $144 million of US taxpayer money. It took 7 years. What they proved was two things: that one, saturated fat does not lead to heart disease. They actually disproved themselves in it, and I can link to the study. It took 7 years for this study. And number two is that caloric restriction actually did not lead to any long-term sustained weight loss at all. So what they did was they took a group of 50,000 people, roughly, women, actually, this was called a Women's Health Initiative, and it controlled 50,000 and another 50,000 controlled. Basically, a control group which said, don't restrict your calories, just eat whatever you want as you're going, and we're gonna track what you do for 7 years. Simple. Another group, what they said was, here's what you're gonna eat for 7 years, and you're gonna eat this many calories because this is 300 less than your resting metabolic rate, and you're gonna lose this much weight and blah, 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 right? So you know what happened? At the first year, the calorie restricted group lost weight, right? At the end of 7 years, there was no difference between the two groups at all, same weight. So what that tells you is that your body is not stupid, and that your body does not want to lose weight, because it has stored your body fat there for a reason. From a historical perspective, you didn't know when your next meal was going to come from. Think about this, like thousands of years ago, right? You didn't know when your next meal was going to come from. You might have to go hunt it. You might have to go pick it or whatever, right? So because of that, there was no agriculture. I'm talking pre-agriculture. So your body naturally stores excess energy it doesn't use as fat. For times when you're not eating, you can use it and you won't die. So your body has stored that for you as a favor, if you think about it. So it's not going to easily give that stuff up, okay? And it might give it up in the short term, but after a while, it's going to say, hold up, like, yeah, we're going too far, because, hey, what if we don't eat for a month? We're going to die or whatever, right? Or what if we don't eat for 2 months because we can't find any food, or, a major ice storm comes in and we're in the middle of December, right? And we're indigenous people and Native Americans, whatever, where we're going to get our food from. So it's like, this is a natural way of being, that your body doesn't want to give up this fat stores long term. So there's two things. You have to understand that that's what your body's trying to do for you. It's actually a favor. So I want to look at it as so negative. And number two is caloric restriction. Long term, your body is going to slow its metabolism down to meet what you're doing, so it won't continually lose so much fat over time. And when you do that, so imagine if you're thinking about calories from this perspective. If you start off and you say, hey, I burn 2,000 calories a day or whatever, normally. So you say, hey, okay, every day I'm going to eat 1,500 calories. And you start off and you start losing weight. Over time, your body's going to go, oh, no, sir, or no, ma'am. We're going to deregulate our system down to 1,500 because that's all we're getting. And guess what? You're not going to lose any more weight, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to cut your calories again. You're going to cut it down to 1,300 calories for whatever. And then your body's going to lose a little bit of weight, and then it's going to go right back down to 1,300 calories and say, try again. And then you're going to overeat because now you're hungry all the time. And guess what happens? Now your body's burning 1,300 calories, and now you go back to eating 2,000, you gain all the weight right back, right? It's just simple math, like it's biology. Yeah, that's what they tell everybody to do. It's just nonsense. So my point is, if you focus on avoiding the foods that make you overeat, avoid the foods that make you crave things, okay? And focus on food that's actual food that's going to benefit your body, okay? your body will fix itself. You don't have to count the calories. Like, trust me, in the short term, you may not lose a lot of weight in 1 week or 2 weeks, but I'm telling you, if you do that, you will start losing weight, and it will be body fat. That's what you want to lose. You don't want to lose weight. You want to lose body fat. These people that go on these caloric restricted diets long term, they lose a lot of muscle mass. The more muscle mass you lose, the slower your metabolism gets, because your muscle mass determines your metabolism. So it's like, hey, we don't want to lose muscle. We want to eat foods that are high in protein and fat and things like that, right? That's why restricting protein in long term is not a good idea, because you will lose muscle eventually. So that's why I wouldn't worry about eating too much protein. I wouldn't worry about reducing calories, as long as you aren't over consuming junk food or junk keto food, that you're focusing on high quality, nutritious food like steak and eggs. And for the meat categories, we're talking about steak and eggs and bacon, and basically things that are from the animal, but high quality as you can afford. I understand that everyone can afford the highest grass-fed. Even if you cannot, it's still going to be better than not eating, is what I'm saying. And liver, if you can get some organ meats. If not, go with the steaks or whatever. Chicken here and there, pork here and there, things like that. Vegetables, if you're going to eat vegetables, eat like leafy greens, like as far as, broccoli, asparagus, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, more cruciferous vegetables. If you're going to eat vegetables, avoid obviously potatoes and different things like that for the most part. Not that you can never have a potato, but I'm just saying on a general basis. So that's that. And also last thing, the cooking oils, I didn't mention that. Never ever use canola oil or soybean oil or any of those oils, because that will definitely, number one, affect your fat loss for sure. Because those oils are highly, highly inflammatory for your system. And when you're dealing with chronic inflammation, your body is not going to want to lose body fat. It's not even going to deal with that. So if you've been on keto for a while and you think you're doing what I'm talking about, and you're eating a lot of dairy, for example, some people, a lot of dairy, especially not grass-fed dairy, can be very inflammatory. So you may want to cut back a little bit on that and say, hey, maybe I'll eat dairy here and there in a week and not every day, right? Because dairy can be inflammatory. So when your body is in a chronic inflammation, it's going to struggle with the fat loss. So the top two things that cause inflammation in your body are vegetable oils, cooking oils, and sugar. Those are like the top two things. And wheat and gluten, but you're not eating that anyway on keto. So the keto things would be the vegetable oils and the dairy. So
what oils do you recommend?
Number one, try to cook in, think about this before I say which oils. Oils are man-made, meaning like, unless it's like a cold pressed olive oil, which is okay, meaning if it's like a cold pressed olive oil, but most oils are processed in a factory and they're refined. They use hexane and they have all these things, right? So the only oils I will use are cold pressed olive oil or cold pressed avocado oil. And if you're going to use high temperature cooking, never use olive oil. Like, only use either beef tallow or ghee butter or pork lard, some fat that like a highly saturated fat that's not going to oxidize. Because what happens is these polyunsaturated oils, they oxidize very easily at high temperatures. So when they oxidize, it becomes very inflammatory in your system. For example, when you go eat French fries at McDonald's or something, right? It's not the potatoes themselves that are really, the potatoes aren't keto, but it's not the potatoes themselves that are that terrible. It's that the potato is so terrible. It's just that the vegetables that they're cooking in such a high temperature, frying them in, are just detrimental to your system, like highly inflammatory. So it's not the potato that's really the problem, really. It's the vegetable oils. So, and the fact that they're frying it. So yes. So I would say, that's why I have these 4 principles. That's why I try to live by. I included that in there. So I'm going to shut up now because I've been talking for like an hour almost. So go ahead. Ask the questions away.
Okay. Can you still see us or what?
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just want, because I'm going to, here he is. Whew, man. Well, first of all, Troy, we applaud you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
he's done a lot of studying under doctors and scientific and biological and all that. And so we appreciate you. Yes. Thank you. And we appreciate you sharing not only the knowledge and the wisdom, but also your experience and your success and how you've been able to not only lose the weight, but to stay healthy and to be strong. And because you get blood work and all your, and tell them that how you reversed your, in that, what was it, your 4-day fast, and you reversed your insulin resistant, and you changed your whole, what was the whole, tell us about that.
Well, you do a 3-day fast, is you actually get a new immune system. People don't know that, but you can really,
disease, 3 days.
you can really.
And now on your, that was black coffee and salt water, correct?
Yeah, but I really reduced the black coffee. I would say the salt water and with a little bit of potassium, things like that in there, some electrolytes, you know. But the it's really a water fast for the most part. Black coffee here and there, because black coffee can reduce your hunger, you know. So if you're dealing with some hunger, obviously 3 days you're gonna be hungry for sure. But the thing about hunger is that it comes and goes like a wave. You know, we think that when we're hungry, we have to eat because it's just gonna keep getting worse. But in fact, that's not what happens. Usually when we're really hungry, that's the worst it's going to be. Because there's a hormone called ghrelin, which regulates it's a hunger hormone. And basically do you remember that movie Gremlins? Right? Anyone remember that movie? So I call ghrelin the gremlin every time if I'm doing a fast, because it's like a little gremlin in your stomach. It's like telling you. You feel it in your stomach, but it's not really in your stomach. So basically, and so ghrelin is spurred, number one, by insulin production. So that's why if you're eating a carbohydrate-based diet before you were doing keto, you will probably, if you're doing keto correctly, you're probably more hungry back then, meaning you probably wanted to eat more often, for example. So I can tell you that, you know, I had this weekend, I went off of keto just for 2 days because of my wife's birthday, and I planned it. So 2 months ago, I said, hey, my wife's birthday, I'm just going to eat what I want, right? Because it's like, hey, I can go 2 months with as long as I go 2 months, no sweeteners, I'm good, right? So I did that. So it was amazing. It was like Saturday, you know, I had regular meal or whatever, and I had some ice cream. And then like a few hours later, I was starving. And I had to think about myself like, wait a minute, I just probably ate calorie-wise more calories than I ever eat in a day, right? And I'm starving again. So it's like it was a real realization, like, because I hadn't eaten any sweeteners in so long, right? That like the spiking of the insulin really spikes that ghrelin hormone a couple hours later. So you always feel like unsatiated on that kind of diet, like standard American diet. You always feel like hungry, so you want to eat 6 times a day, right? So it was kind of, you know, in a way, it was cool for like going 50 days with no sweeteners at all. And then eating like a 2 days where like most people eat like regular diet, and then experiencing it like because like I said, I kind of learned this year really the difference between hunger and cravings and all that. And then really how much of a struggle it was for me to even not eat when I was having those cravings when I was on this standard diet versus when I'm on keto and I have the cravings, I can deal with it much easier. But dealing with it on the standard diet, eating the sugar, was much more difficult, to the point where I was like, I don't even want to deal with the cream. I'm just going to give it to it because, hey, it's a day. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to do it long term. But I was really empathizing with other people who try to cut calories while eating a bunch of sugar. It's really difficult, like, because you're hungry all the time. Yeah. So
you did your 4 days, basically your salt water, a little bit of potassium and black coffee here and there. And then you went back and you had a certain test done, correct?
Well, the insulin resistance test was done. I just think the insulin resistance test wasn't really because of the fast per se. It was because at that time I had been doing keto for pretty strict for 6 months. So I really think the keto pretty much fixed the insulin resistance. It's just that the fast was the last thing I did before I got that test done. That's all. But
So why would someone want to get rid of insulin resistance?
Well, insulin resistance is basically the cause of most modern disease. Like if you think about what our modern diseases are, so you have diabetes, right? You have heart disease. You have there's even some talk now about different cancers, but that's the science on that is up in the air. So you have those three things. You have obesity, right? Which is a modern thing because in the past, we didn't have this kind of rate of obesity, right? So you have obesity, heart disease, diabetes, strokes, some different forms of cancer. And all of these things, if you compare them all, they're all based off of something called hyperinsulinemia, which means that your body is producing too much insulin. So how do you get hyperinsulinemia? Well, essentially, there's two ways, and you kind of get it from both ways if you think about it. So hyperinsulinemia means your body is chronically making too much insulin. When you get hyperinsulinemia, you get diabetes eventually. Okay. And number two is you will get heart disease because most likely because the real cause of heart disease is inflammation. So people think that the cause of heart disease is cholesterol, which is absolute nonsense. So people have had cholesterol since human beings existed, okay, in their bloodstream. And people have been eating animals since the beginning of time. And yet, all of a sudden now, in the last 50 years, we have all this heart disease, right? And all of a sudden, animals or whatever, this what's causing it. It's like mind-blowing. So basically, the simple version is why hyperinsulinemia causes this. There's really two causes that really cause chronic inflammation, or the main causes. Number one, smoking. If you're smoking, you have to stop immediately, like number one. Smoking will most likely lead to heart disease because it's like one of the most inflammatory things you can do inside your body chronically. Number two, so I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying if you're smoking, that's something I would probably stop. Number two is vegetable oils, okay, highly inflammatory. And number three is sugar. Those are like the top three things, right? Then you have other things like stress and things like that can be inflammatory. But the top three things that people do all the time are smoking, sugar, and vegetable oils. And if you think about it, the government has really cracked down on these campaigns about how bad smoking is for you. And people tend to actually cut out smoking quite a bit from what they used to in the 80s. You can probably see that people smoke less. But that doesn't mean that people aren't getting heart disease. But if you look at the rates of heart disease in the US, it's actually tailed off. It's high, but it's not going up anymore like it used to. And they contribute that to smoking decrease, actually. So that's one thing. But the reason why it's so high, though, is because of vegetable oils and sugar mainly. And in fact, what do they tell you to cook in? They tell you to cook in vegetable oils. And they tell you that the bottom of the food pyramid is carbohydrates, which all breaks down into sugar anyway. I'm not saying you have to be drinking Cokes all day, but I'm saying even that bottom food pyramid, any carbohydrate you consume breaks down into glucose, which is sugar. I don't care what it is. So the reason why that vegetables are just the least is because they have the fiber to offset it. But breads, pasta, grains, all those things, like, I'm not saying a bowl of rice is going to kill you or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that the 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day eating all these carbs all day long is really highly inflammatory in people's systems. And then as drinking the sodas and drinking the Starbucks drinks and this and that, it's like all just pure sugar, right? So not only are you drinking it, but you're eating it in other forms which people don't even realize they're eating it, you know? So, and then you're cooking in the oils that are inflammatory. So you're just really doing a number. So what happens is when your body gets inflamed like that, right, it can actually cause, you have arteries and veins, right, in your body. So it actually causes, I'm going to stop here. Do you think that the cholesterol, so these people claim that cholesterol just magically goes into your arteries and clogs your arteries, right? That's what they claim. It's nonsense, because what's the difference between your arteries and your veins? Because the cholesterol, it's going through your body all the time. It goes through your veins, yet you don't get clogged veins. You only get clogged arteries. One. So if the cholesterol by itself was just like hopping in to your vein, just destroying things, right? Logically, it would destroy your veins too, because, hey, it's going through both your veins and your arteries, but it doesn't. It can only impact your arteries. And why is that? Well, it has to do with pressure. It has to do with your arteries have this thing called this endothelial layer on them, which is susceptible to pressure, which your veins don't have, okay? And what causes pressure? That's why when you have high blood pressure, that is, you are at risk for developing heart disease, because the higher your blood pressure is, the more likely that your body will press these things into your arterial wall. But even that, it cannot, there's two forms of what they call the bad cholesterol, which is nonsense. There's only one type of cholesterol. There's no bad cholesterol. Cholesterol is just a molecule. There is these things called LDL and HDL, which are lipoproteins, which transport cholesterol. When an LDL lipoprotein gets oxidized, meaning it becomes rancid, it actually turns small, okay? They call it a small, dense LDL particle. When it's small, it can pass through your endothelial wall when there's enough pressure, okay? Which is caused by the inflammation. So, therefore, the cholesterol itself is essentially a fire. It's just like a tree. Would you say that trees cause forest fires? No. Fires cause forest fires. Trees are just there when it happens. They get lit up, okay? It's the same principle. The idea that cholesterol itself causes heart disease is just absolute nonsense. So basically, you're blaming a tree for a forest fire. Like, imagine you yelling at a tree, why did you get lit on fire, right? It's like, okay, if we eliminate the things that cause the fire, we don't have to worry about the problem. Because cholesterol, actually, 80% of the cholesterol in your body gets used by your brain. Your brain thrives on cholesterol. Because every cell in your whole body needs cholesterol to be built. So cholesterol is a natural, all of your testosterone and estrogen, the precursor to all of those things are cholesterol. That's why when you go on a statin, people get erectile dysfunction or all these things, because that's the number one side effect, because it decreases your testosterone output. There's all these, because statins actually impact your body's ability to even synthesize its own cholesterol. Because whether you eat cholesterol or not, your body makes it. It makes it about 2,000 grams a day or something, or 1,000,000 grams a day or something like that. Because that's how much it needs on average to survive. The point is, and by the way, when you eat too much of it, it gets rid of it. There's a little system in your liver that kicks it out. It's like not just you're going to eat a bunch of cholesterol and it's just going to clog everything. It just doesn't make any sense. And when you look at your arterial walls, when they get quote unquote clogged, right? I think it's like 0.05% of that buildup is cholesterol. It's like such a, it's mostly all scar tissue basically. So, and calcium. So calcium builds because it's trying to repair the cracks. It's trying to repair the damage in your arterial wall. I don't want to get too much into that because we're not talking about keto. My point is, a lot of these things are just like fake news. They try to pull the wool over your eyes to sell statins and medications. And if you think about it, the way that people lived up until 50 or 100 years ago, people might not live as long as we do on average because they didn't have modern technology to keep them alive, for example, right? Obviously, we have advanced medical technology to be able to keep people alive longer and medications to keep them alive, which is a good thing. But if you think about it, what has really extended the human life has been sanitation and vaccines, because, before vaccines, you would have babies dying a lot faster, right? You would have more babies dying before vaccines. So just mathematically, people are living longer because people aren't dying as babies as often, right? But that doesn't mean that people weren't likely more healthy before modern age. Like they were less overweight, they had less chronic disease, just that they might have died from some infectious disease or whatever, polio or something like that, which you get not from overeating.
Right.
So it's just a different way of dying from that they had.
Okay.
Anyway, so all right, so questions, sorry.
So we got, I know, Troy, your brain's going, wow, a minute. Have a cup of coffee. All right,
Okay.
so I know, really, this is hard now. Yeah, take a cold shower, yeah. All right, this is Courtney. Can you see yourself,
Yes, I
Courtney?
can see myself.
Okay, so this is Courtney has a question.
Yeah, so a question / comment. So first of all, I really love your presentation. I love the whole idea around the RUSK approach, and I'm really into like the scientific studies. But my question is like, they all change and vary, because I'm really interested in like always a science-based approach or a data-based approach with anything. because like you, I need to understand what I'm doing in order to have success from it. But if I can find a study to support any kind of ratchet way I want to eat.
Of course.
And so, like, for instance, I recently read something. I'm not saying it to refute anything you're saying or to suggest it, because I'm still researching it myself. But I recently found a study that said that olive oil isn't so bad to cook with, and it kind of has all this data. If you're interested, you can check it out. I'm sure if you look it up, it's recently released, like within the last year. I say recently, but like there's just all these varying studies. And so my question is, like, how do you determine which ones are actually valid? Because they can, I mean, you know, if you go to the NIH website, you can find all kinds of studies to support anything. So how do you determine which ones you use to test out personally?
Okay, so here's the hard two parts. You mentioned olive oil. I don't think I said that olive oil was bad to cook with. Okay. I said that olive oil is one of the better choices if you're going to use an oil, just not at very high temperatures.
Sure.
So I do cook with olive oil once in a while. Like I just made eggs today in some olive oil, to give you an example. Okay? So yes, sometimes I cook with it, but I wouldn't like cook at a very high temperature. Like I wouldn't sear a steak in it. So anyway, scientific studies. Let me explain what science is, and then I'm going to explain what nutritional science is, because nutritional science is not actual science. So science is based off of something called empiricism, which is the empirical process. So the empirical process is this. Somebody has a hypothesis, which is an educated guess, right? So what that means is like, hey, I think that saturated fat leads to heart disease based off of some whatever, a survey we did, right? Okay, so how do we prove that, right? So if you were to use an real science is empirical. If you're not using an empirical method, it's not actually science, because the scientific method is empiricism. Empiricism means that you have to actually go do an experiment, okay? Observe the response of the experiment, and then use that data to prove or disprove your own hypothesis. Once you do that, if you can validate your hypothesis, then somebody else has to go and replicate the same experiment, okay? Once they replicate the same experiment, then somebody else has to go and replicate the same experiment, okay? Once multiple people of different parts of the scientific community have replicated that experiment, only then can you say that that scientific experiment is validated. That's how real science works, and everything else but nutrition, okay? So what nutrition does, and it's tricky because in order to do controlled trials on human beings, there's this thing called ethics, right? So what that means is like, what you would have to do real study is like take kids from birth, give them 2 totally different diets until they died, right? And then see which one was beneficial, right? Like to be able to do that long term is like they would consider unethical, right? So what they do is they use something called epidemiology, and I like to call it astrology because it's just total junk nonsense, okay? So it's the same principle. So what they do is they say, hey, okay, so we're gonna take, could be any number of people, right? We're gonna take 1,000 people in some country. We're gonna ask them what they ate for the last 5 years in a survey, okay? Now, somebody comes to you and says, what was your name again? I'm sorry. You were just asking me the question. Courtney. All right, Courtney, in the last 5 years, how much red meat did you consume versus eggs versus broccoli versus Brussels sprouts versus this and that, right? Are you going to accurately, number one, be able to remember everything you did for the last 5 years, okay? And really give it has no accuracy at all to it, okay? And imagine if you could do it yourself, Courtney. Imagine if 10,000 people could do it accurately. Okay, number one, it's impossible. And then they take all of this, what I would call junk data, because it's just surveys. It's not real controlled trials or anything. It's just a bunch of surveys. And then they take that survey data, and then they say, well, out of 10,000 people, 6,000 people said they ate red meat 60% of the time, and 4,000 people said they ate it 40% of the time. Therefore, red meat causes this. It's absolute nonsense. It doesn't even, one, it's based off of surveys. Two, it doesn't even take into consideration any of the other factors which they were doing. So it's like, hey, yeah, maybe the people that ate more red meat in that study smoked more. Have you considered that? Have you considered anything else? Maybe the people that are vegetarians worked out more. Who knows, right? It's like they don't take any of these things into consideration. It's not a real science. It's not based off of empiricism. So there's this thing they teach you in science class 101 is that correlation does not equal causation, right? So all of these nutritional studies, if you ever hear the words, you're going to see it online or on TV all the time. If you ever hear the words linked to, or associated with, or increases the risk, okay? Those three big things, those are all based off of epidemiology, astrology, junk science. It's not real science, okay?
Not real.
What that means is they have not done any type of empirical process. None of it's been replicated. None of it's been peer reviewed. It's based off of surveys, okay? And they get funded, when you look into the funding behind these major big epidemiological studies, they get funded by Coca-Cola, the drug industry, because these big studies cost a lot of money, and who's gonna fund it? So basically, you have a drug company who will spend tens of millions of dollars to fund a study, which basically, so imagine you're a drug company, right? You're Pfizer, and you want people to consume more of your statins.
Yep.
So you are going to fund studies and say, hey, we're gonna give you a group of scientists $30 million to go as a grant or whatever to go do this study. And you get to keep a certain percentage of it to keep going, right? Okay, so guess what's gonna happen when you do that study? And if somebody's paying you $30 million, you are likely going to come up with the results that people want, because you don't have to do any real science. You just have to ask a bunch of questions in a survey and then use this data to say whatever you want. And that's why you told me that you could find any study that tells you anything you want, right? The reason for that is because the data is almost useless. It's either manipulated or it's just junk data. So that's why one day eggs are good for you, the next day they're bad. They're all just junk science. It's not based off of, real science is based off of two things. It's based off of random controlled trials that are replicated. That's number one. You know, it's something like, and they posted in the what's the main British newspaper? I can't remember. The New York Times in Britain is. Right?
Yeah.
They posted this this thing that was really revealing. It basically said that 9 out of 10 controlled trials have never ever been replicated in all of scientific literature. That's about 90% of all the trials that people are using. And I'm talking about trials, not even epidemiology. I'm talking about controlled trials, have never been replicated. So what I mean is, you can post this trial that says it does anything, right? Basically. And if no one replicates it and no one challenges it,
It's just a hypothesis,
Yeah.
really.
well, what I mean is, and that's what people use. People use epidemiology, number one, as causation, which is science 101. You're not supposed to do it. And number two is, even the controlled trials are not replicated most of them. Not one nutritional controlled trial has ever been replicated that they use for the basis of anything. So it's no wonder why the whole population is so confused about what's healthy and what isn't. And that the processed food industry wants you to eat a bunch of plant-based food, because you know why? Like this whole idea of like Impossible Burgers and Beyond Meat burgers. This is lab food that's made in a laboratory.
Yeah.
That is 100% processed food. Okay, that is funded by, not only funded by obviously the processed food companies, but funded by the taxpayers. Meaning, you and I, we as taxpayers in the U.S., we subsidize largely. Now there are some animal food subsidies because they do support some farmers, but largely the percentage of our taxpayer money when it comes to food goes to subsidizing processed food. Because what they do is they take what's in processed food. Well, you have soybeans, right? Soybean oil, enriched flour, right? So you have vegetable oils, you have sugar, and you have flour, right? These three things particularly are subsidized by the taxpayer. That's why you can go into a grocery store and feed your whole family for $2 on pasta and tomato sauce, because the pasta is subsidized because it's a processed flour. And the tomato sauce is subsidized because it's high fructose corn syrup base, right? So it's not real tomato sauce, Muslim. So basically that's why it's so cheap. And that's why you go to buy a steak and it's so expensive. Yet the steak is the one that has the most nutrition per calorie, right? So anyway, that is to answer your question, hopefully, about why the science is so confusing, is because there's not hardly any real science. The only things we can really go by right now are if we understand the mechanisms in your body, how they work. Meaning, when you eat something, what does your body do with it? How does it process it? And that science is largely out there. So the science behind how atherosclerosis works, like how when you get inflammation, they can see under a microscope they can introduce inflammatory things into your system and watch how your endothelial cells in your arteries actually react to it. They can see that under a microscope. Right? And so you can I can send you some videos if you're interested in that. And you can see how they can show the mechanism of how the arterial walls break down. And it's not stupid cholesterol. Okay. So now, is that a controlled trial? No. But it is the actual mechanism of how your arterial wall is broken down. So what would you rather prefer? An epidemiological study about nonsense or how the thing works in your body? I'll choose how things work in my body any day over that. So that's a little bit about the science. So.
Okay.
I appreciated that answer to my question.
Thank you, Troy. That was very informative. Anyone else have a question? Troy, maybe for those who are starting keto, what regimen how would you start them, or those maybe who have tried and struggle? And you actually addressed a lot of it's mom. Yeah. Hi. A lot of those issues and how to overcome. But how about, is there just something that you can suggest to the people and how to get started or get back on track?
All right. If I was going to start keto all over again, this is what I would do.
Everyone get your pens and paper.
Okay. All right. Don't fast at first. It's too hard.
No fasting.
At first. If you're just starting, okay? Try to go like a month without, just eat when you're hungry. That's it. Simple, okay? But when you do eat, don't eat foods that are going to make you crave more food. So that would be, try to not drink Diet Coke. Right? Just because it has no carbs doesn't mean that it's going to benefit you. Because like I said, a lot of this is hormonal, not necessarily calories or carbs, okay? So when you drink stuff, try to drink water, try to drink some tea, try to drink some coffee, right? Put some heavy cream in it if you want. Put some, if you want to use a sweetener, maybe use Swerve or something like that, but even try not to overdo that stuff too much. You know what I mean? Like Truvia or something, like stevia. Stevia is probably the least offensive out of all those, because to me, stevia doesn't taste like real sugar. So because of that, it doesn't give you the same cravings to me, right? So
is that Truvia?
Truvia has a little bit of erythritol. It's half stevia, half Truvia, so it is a little more like real sugar. Okay. I would say Truvia is going to be better than like Diet Coke or something. So what I mean is, try to wean yourself off of that stuff. So at the beginning, if you got to use a little bit of like Truvia, a little bit of stevia, a little bit of erythritol, okay, that's okay. But in your drink or something, in your coffee, in your tea, a little bit, don't overdo it, right? But try to avoid those keto desserts as much as possible. And if you do eat them like on a weekend or something. Don't eat them every day. It's not going to solve your problem. Your problem is likely that you're addicted to the food. You're addicted to the sweetness. That's what I've been, right? So I understand. I empathize. So the only way you could not be addicted to something is to stop consuming it. Mm-hmm. So basically, if you do, when you're first starting keto, you might say it's too difficult to just cut it all out. Then fine. Have a little bit of stevia, in your drink once a day or something, right? Or a little bit of Truvia in your coffee or your iced tea or something, right? Maybe on a weekend, make a keto dessert. On a weekend. Right? On one day on a Saturday or something, have fun or something, make it dessert, right? Okay? But don't make it a daily habit, because those foods, the things you should be eating every day, are highly nutritious, bioavailable foods. Those are not that, okay? So those are just keto junk food, right? Think about that. Any keto desserts are keto junk food. It's still junk food. Just because it's not high in carbs doesn't mean it's not junk food. It is junk food, right? So treat it like junk food is what I'm saying. Just a more acceptable version of real junk food because it's going to be better. It's not going to spike your insulin as much. It's not going to give you the other problems that real junk food is going to give you. So yes, it's not technically bad. It's bad, but I think for the mental state, though, it will help you if you can go five days without it at a time. Right? And then eventually you might say on a weekend, hey, I don't think I need that this weekend. And then you know you're getting there. Right? So, and then when you do eat junk food, maybe you'll have real sugar and it's not going to be the end of the world, right? On one day or whatever, right? Then it's like, okay, it's not the big. Well, I would avoid sugar totally for a couple months when you're starting. Like I would not even consider eating it one time. Like, because it will just trigger those things in your brain and you won't be able to break this addiction. Almost, I would venture to say like 90% or more people walking around the US are addicted to sugar. Most people, or even sweeteners, most people can't go 2 weeks without having anything sweet. Could you? Most people probably not. And I couldn't before either until I did it myself. So that was, that's something I said. So my thing was eat, things to eat on keto, like really good things, fish, red meat, eggs. If you eat chicken, I wouldn't eat chicken like as my main staple, but if you want to eat a few times a week, whatever, right? It's no big deal. Chicken, it's just that chicken tends to be very lean. So it's like, to me, lean chicken is not very satiating to me. Like if it doesn't have a lot of fat. So usually it's like, you eat it with the skin or whatever, it's better. So if you're going to eat chicken, eat it with the skin, like the chicken thighs or the legs or something like that, or get some fat on the side somewhere else. Do a shot of MCT oil or something like that. So there's that. Nuts. Try not to go crazy with the nuts. Like, I'll be honest with you. When I first started keto, I ate a lot of nuts. And I had a lot of success, but I was very overweight at the time. So it's like, the less overweight I got, the nuts are like high-fat food, that's true. But the nuts, to me, I could start craving nuts after a while. Because like, for instance, like especially like almonds or something, like that if you really enjoy them, then it's like, hey, I ate some food. Oh, let me have a handful of nuts. Then a handful of nuts becomes 3 handfuls, right? Because it's hard to stop eating them, but they're good. Right? Right. So think about that. Anything that's causing you to eat more than you want, that should be a trigger to tell you, hey, maybe I should think about not over-consuming this food or not having it every day. I no longer have nuts every day. I probably have them once, twice a week. Give an example. So am I saying you can't eat nuts every day? No. I'm saying if you think that they're causing you to overeat them, then back off. Same thing with dairy. Same thing. Is it wrong to eat some cheese? No. If you realize that you always want to be eating a bunch of cream cheese and stuff, maybe that's not the best idea, right? It's like anything, like you have to think about, what's not going to cause you to overeat? Eggs, steak, dark green vegetables, fish. Those things are not going to cause you to just sit there and pound just nonstop eating, right? You're going to eat you're going to eat it and you're going to say, I'm full and I can't eat anymore. And then you're going to say, I want something sweet. And then you're not really hungry. You're just having a craving and it's fine. You can do the writing down. You can journal it. You can do all that, right? So keto 101. Eat high fat at the beginning for sure. I still eat high fat. I just don't count it. But I can tell you I generally eat high fat foods. But count your macros at the beginning, right? Know what you're eating, how it's affecting you. Never go over 20 grams of carbs a day, like on keto when you're starting. Like just keep it. And it's easy to do if you cut out those keto sweets and the bars and all that. Because then what are you left eating? Meat and vegetables and fish, like pretty much, right? And some butter or some butter, some MCT oil, some coffee, some heavy cream. None of those things have carbs. So it's not like you have to worry about it. When you have to worry about it is when you start looking at labels for everything of the keto products and the slim fast products and all of this stuff. These people are trying to make money off of you. They don't care about you. So understand that. They're just, if it wasn't keto, it will be something else they'd be making money off of. So, just because it has the word keto doesn't mean it's any good for you. Just another thing. So
like
that's what.
1 gram, there's like some type of, what are they? Like a tortilla or some type of a wrap there's a wrap, Joseph's brand, and it's like
Okay.
1 gram per wrap. So you don't think you should stay away from that stuff, right?
I mean, if it's only 1 gram of carbs, you're telling me?
Yeah.
See, the thing is, they say 1 gram. I don't know that product. I can't say
Yeah.
that particular product.
Well, I
But a
can
lot
give
of times,
I'm sorry, I can get a little bit of information about that. So
Yeah.
like it's net and it's mostly oat fiber and it's a little bit of wheat in it. So the net is like 1 gram.
You don't want
wouldn't
wheat.
eat it.
No wheat. No,
Wouldn't eat it.
no.
No, don't eat wheat. And
No
if you're
wheat.
gonna eat it, if you tell me, Troy, I really want this tortilla, always say, okay, eat 2 of them on a Saturday or something, right? But don't eat them every day. So like, that type of stuff is not something that's like everyday food. It doesn't have any nutrition. Again, going back to the principle of like eating highly nutritious foods mainly, does this food have a lot of nutrition? No, it doesn't. So it's like, I mean, it's treat it like junk food. That's what I would do. Treat it like a food that you eat once in a while. That's about it. Right? You can make tortillas out of like other things. There's some people make tortillas out of, I don't know. People have recipes on all kinds of stuff. I
Yeah,
don't know. But
you know how I've done it is with cheese. I take I bake cheese. I fry my cheese. I'll get a huge amount of cheese and I'll put it in butter in a hot pan with butter, and I put it in there and then I flatten it out and then you brown it and it comes out like a Cheez-It. And you can use that if you're going to do salsa with your avocado. So you're getting your fats that way, and it's very good.
so yeah, you could do that. Again, I don't know if I would consume a ton of cheese every single day either.
No.
But like I said, once in a while, a couple times a week, if you want to eat some cheese like that, it's fine. But one other thing I wouldn't do is sit there and snack on cheese all day long. Like, because cheese, for some people, is very, very, can be addicting. Like for some people, right? So,
yeah, inflammation.
yeah, and for some, like cheese, really, it's weird with dairy because dairy affects different people different ways. And it's hard to tell. Like for me, like I don't think it affects me that much, but I don't overconsume it. But I can tell you though, it's a real easy way to overeat though. Like you can put cheese on anything, right? So like, and it's almost like, so yeah, if I have a hamburger without the bun, do I put cheese on it? Yes. Do I sit there and put like 5 slices of cheese and then have a bunch of cream cheese after for dessert? No, like, I'll have a piece of cheese. Okay. It's not a big deal, right? When I go to Chipotle, I eat at Chipotle usually on average once a week because I travel 4 days a week, right? So I cook in my hotel room a lot, but when I don't cook in my hotel room, I'll usually go to Chipotle because it's fast. The quality is pretty good for for what it is. It's not that expensive. And it tastes pretty good, right? It's better than like a McDonald's or something. So what do I get at Chipotle? Well, I get a double steak bowl, just double steak. I get the cheese, usually a little bit extra cheese. Remind you, I'm not eating 3-4 meals a day. I'm eating 1 to 2 meals a day typically. So it's not like I'm eating cheese 3-4 times a day. So I might eat it once a day. So I'll get a bowl with a little bit extra cheese. I get the lettuce. I get hot sauce. For me, that's good. You want to add some guacamole to it, whatever, okay. You don't need Chipotle to give you not saying you guys, but just ranting a little bit. They came out with this keto Chipotle bowl, which is marketed branding. This nonsense. I've been eating Chipotle since I started keto on my own. It's just 100% keto. It's just protein and fat. I mean, and like some lettuce. That's all it is. So that's keto. You don't need to market it that way. You don't need to count the macros for that. Anyway, sorry about that. So yes. So what I would say is think about the foods you're consuming on a daily basis. Is this food making me overeat? If the answer is yes, back off. That's all. That's one recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, do you have any questions? Not at all? Yes. Yes, I do. Yes, I will text you the site to where you can get on my support group. Yeah, that's great. And also, I just wanted to say that Troy, he's, well, we both are keto coaches, but he's an expert, as you can see. I don't know an inkling of what everything he knows, but he coaches and he has different levels of coaching. So if you want him as a personal trainer and a coach, You can go on, what is it? It's Patreon. If you're interested, let me know. It's a website thing. And then he has different levels and how much that you want to use him, and he will help you along and monitor you and work with you. You know, in different, it's just like I personal trained for 32 years. So I would start off, you know, at first working a lot with people, and then I would meet with them once a month, you know, things like that. So he can do either videos, he can do phone calls, things of that nature. So if you're interested in that, he was my coach. If I didn't have him, I'm telling you, I would not have been successful at all. Certain people need coach. I was one. I need it because I had severe addictions. So I'm just saying he's excellent, and I highly recommend him. Not because he's my son, just remove that. It's just that, yeah, it is a bonus. Because, yeah. But he does have different levels, and, you know, anywhere from, what's your prices, Troy, from $50 to
$10. It's just $10. $10, and the highest level is $50. It's just $10 or $50. The difference is, like, for $10, basically, there's a little group chat that I'm in, my mom's in, and I have some other people. And basically, it's just like anytime you can text in there, and then, you know, within that day, I'll get back to you and answer any questions. I'll post, you know, I'll share things I'm doing, I'm learning with you, and we can just talk. And it's just like a group thing. So it might not be just one person. What I'm trying to do is develop a community of people. Well, obviously it takes my time, and, you know, I travel and I work a lot. So I just want it to be people who are really more dedicated to it. So that's why there is some fee. The $50 is basically, it includes two things. It includes an hour of time during the month, consultation one-on-one, as well as access to the daily group, as well as I want anybody who, even if you do the $10, I want to do like a group call like this once a month where we can talk about, it won't just be me talking, it'll be everyone talking about, like, hey, this month I've been learning this, I've been struggling with this, I'm not losing weight, I'm losing weight, I'm doing this. So it's kind of like a group. So it's just basically like, you get, for $10, you pretty much get access to this group chat, which is 24/7, but not saying I'm going to be 24/7 on it, but on a daily basis, I can respond for the most part. And then for $50, just like obviously that plus an hour of consultation, and you can do 2 half hours a month, you could do an hour a month, and we could do one-on-one kind of coaching when it comes to health, keto, longevity, fasting. I have a lot of experience fasting. All the stuff we're talking about, cholesterol and like all this stuff is stuff that I've been studying for the last year and a half. Not that I know everything, I do not. But I mean, I am a professional coach in my job, so I do.
Yeah,
so I'm a coach in the IT and technology.
Yeah.
So in technology, so I have coaching skills as well, like one-on-one interpersonal coaching skills. So I think there is some value there, meaning I don't think $50 is unreasonable for an hour.
No.
So because of that, so anyway, but that's totally optional. And if not, you know, if you don't want to pay anything, then, you know, obviously you don't have to. I mean, I did this for free, so it's not like I'm not about the money. I'm about helping people. I've put this together to help people in the first place. It's just that what happened was people would be reaching out to me all the time, and I really just like didn't have the time. So I said, hey, for the people who are more serious about it, I can dedicate the time. So that's pretty much.
That's good. Lexi has a question.
Yeah.
Here's a name. On Patreon.
Patreon, what's your username?
Keto Troy.
That's easy.
Pretty simple. Pretty simple. Okay.
Oh, Keto Karen, he's Keto Troy.
There you go.
Yeah.
And you can cancel any time. It's not like what do you call it? Like, it's not like you have to sign up for anything. It's just like, if you pay $10, if you feel like you're not getting any value, you cancel it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Troy, as far as like vitamins and stuff, I know, or I don't know if do you take the keto vitals and, and any of that stuff? Because I'm thinking I'm moving away from vegetables some, which I'm not yet, but, I was thinking if I'm doing that, I know, like, I've heard things that you're supposed to have 7 cups of, salad and stuff, which I can never do. But
this is absolute fake news.
Potassium and stuff.
Okay, vitamins. This is a topic that recently I've been really diving into. So this is a good question because that's fresh on my mind, actually. The RDAs are based off of absolute nonsense. So basically, the recommended daily intake of vitamins is based off of a group of old, I'm just going to put it frankly, not that it matters, but think about the time in the 50s, right? A group of old white guys getting together, okay, probably smoking cigars, okay, and it's basically a giant boys club if you look at the history of this thing, and coming up with, again, no proven science behind anything that they came up with, okay? What they did was they looked at a bunch of survey data, again, okay, of people on mixed diets and said, well, people, they should really get between this amount and this amount to stay healthy based off of these countries and these survey data, based off of people eating generally a standard American diet. So if you are eating a standard American diet, you are going to be deficient in a lot of nutrients. And here's why. Because standard American diet is very high in wheat, okay? So wheat has something in it called wheat germ. It's something called a lectin. Now lectins are in other types of vegetables, but wheat is just particularly the nastiest one. So what lectin is basically, have you ever heard of something called leaky gut syndrome?
Yeah.
Okay, that's caused by these things called lectins. Okay, so the worst form of lectin is in wheat. Okay, and that is why when people tend to cut wheat out of their diet, even if they don't go keto, if they just cut the wheat out, they go on a gluten-free diet. Think about that, right? Because gluten is a lectin. It's the worst lectin you can consume. So when people go on a gluten-free diet, they report all these intestinal benefits, right? They say, oh, like I feel better. I have less gas. I have less problems. My irritable bowel syndrome's gone, all this thing. It's because of the lectins in the wheat, right? So number one, so lectins are what we call an anti-nutrient, meaning that they actually absorb the nutrients you consume and block you from your body absorbing it. So remember I talked about bioavailability of nutrients and not just nutrients on paper? This is what I'm talking about. So there are many foods high in lectins. Wheat is the number one offender, but I actually have a blog post I wrote about this I can send you guys about what foods have these lectins. So what that means when it comes to vitamins is people eating a lot of wheat, these lectins are actually inhibiting their ability to absorb the nutrients heavily. Right? So you are going to need to consume a bunch of vitamins and probably all this stuff because you're not eating a diet that is natural for you. For instance, nobody ever before they started the wheat agriculture, which in human history is very, very recent actually, no one was consuming wheat like this. Our bodies weren't made this way, whatever you believe. They were not built this way. They only in recent human history of people consuming wheat like this. So because of that, if you think about it, pre-wheat consumption, you wouldn't, and other anti-nutrient type of foods, which I can list a few of them, like spinach is another one, for example. So there's a few of them. Yeah, is another high anti-nutrient food. Give an example.
It has lectins in it.
It has something called oxalates, which are another rabbit hole.
Oh yeah.
So oxalates cause kidney disease, kidney stones. Give an example. But oxalates also bind to minerals. Okay, so minerals and nutrients, which means that they block the absorption. So do phytic acid. They call them phytates. So like the skin of an almond, right? The outside of an almond is high in phytates. So if you consume a bunch of almonds, it's actually going to block your absorption of the minerals. So like your calcium, magnesium, and potassium, the almonds will block that, right? So the reason why is because this is what people, particularly vegans, don't understand. Human beings cannot, now again, biblically, maybe it's the fall of man. I don't know. I don't really care because we live in a world which is based in modern reality. Modern reality tells us that human beings can't survive unless something dies. Okay? No life can survive without something else losing its life for us to sustain. I don't care if it's an animal or a plant or whatever. Okay, something's got to die because plants at some point were alive. We can all agree on that, right? So because of that, plants actually have a natural defense system, unlike animals who can run away. Okay, animals and us as people, if somebody's trying to eat us, if it's chasing us, we're going to run away, right? That's our natural defense system. We can fight back. That's why people go hunting to get killed or whatever, right? Animals don't want to be eaten, obviously. But guess what? Neither do plants. So plants cannot run away. So plants have natural defense mechanisms that they build up to ward off things eating it. Particularly, it started off with insects. So plants have natural insecticides. So when insects would consume them, the insects would die off, okay? So, and they wrap their babies, their seeds, heavily in these natural insecticides to avoid, because every living being on this planet wants to be fruitful and multiply. It's just a natural way of existing, okay? So plants are the same, they just can't talk, but they're not inanimate objects. People don't realize that. So lectins are a plant natural insecticide, actually. So when insects eat the lectins, or small rodents, they might die. Human beings, what it does to us is it chronically consuming them, it results in us getting these vitamin and nutrient deficiencies, as well as what lectins do is they actually latch on, and this is all, the mechanism of this is in the scientific literature. I blog all about this. Lectins actually attach to your gut lining, okay? And they open it, and they release a toxin called zonulin, which gets inside your gut, okay? And when zonulin gets in there, all of this stuff that is not supposed to be in your bloodstream, that's supposed to be excreted for your body, gets leaked into your bloodstream, okay? And it creates a bunch of inflammation in your body, okay? And it affects your brain because your gut microbiome heavily affects your brain, okay? So things like anxiety, depression, a lot of these things, like when people go on lectin-free diets, they will anecdotally report a lot of their mental issues go away longer term, because the lectins are really, and lectins cause autoimmune disorders. So when you have, what lectins do is they mimic one of your cells, okay? They mimic a healthy cell in your body, which is kind of mind-blowing what they do. And then think about how smart these plants are, what they naturally have in them. So your body looks at a lectin like an outside invader, right? So it'll send your immune system to go kill it, okay? Because it's a toxin. Lectins are a toxin in your body. So, but lectins, once they latch onto your gut lining and your cells, your body actually no longer can tell the difference between a healthy cell and a lectin cell. They basically camouflage themselves. And your body will start to attack its own healthy cells. And when it does that, you get something called autoimmune disease. Okay? So autoimmune disorder, leaky gut, this is caused by lectins. A lot of anxiety, depression. I mean, there's a story about this woman named Michaela Peterson. It was Jordan Peterson. If you know Jordan Peterson, it's his daughter. And she tells her story, and she's became a real prominent figure now in something called the Carnivore diet, which is basically only meat for the most part. And she had severe, crippling depression. Like when you listen to her talk, it's like mind blowing. She was on she had something like 6 surgeries on her hips and her legs, and when she was 16, right? She had so much pain that she couldn't walk. She had severe depression to the point where she was on every single antidepressant you can imagine for years. By the time she was 22, right? Totally like a zombie, suicidal, okay? Even on all these antidepressants. Did some research online, found out about these lectins. This is a true story. You can listen to her story. Immediately cut out the lectins. Immediately, like within a few weeks, started noticing like some inflammation going down, right? Mental benefits. A couple months ago, then she says, hey, I'm going to cut out all grains, all sugar, no grains, right? Boom. Depression starts lifting, right? All these So she's still eating vegetables and meat, basically, right? So, but she was still taking medication, but she was just feeling better most of the time. So then she said, hey, I learned that a lot of these vegetables have a lot of these things, and maybe my body just can't handle them. Because if you think about it, all of these things like lectins, oxalates, which are found in like your green vegetables like spinach, kale, tea, coffee, these are foods that have oxalates in them. Now, tea and coffee are less than something like spinach, of course, but they are all essentially poisons. So things like Brussels sprouts, cruciferous vegetables, the reason why people say they're healthy is because they create in healthy people in small doses something called hormesis, which basically means that you introduce a poison. It's essentially how vaccines work. You introduce a poison to your system, right? Your immune system goes and attacks it and defeats it, and then it becomes stronger, okay? So some people think that by consuming foods like vegetables, like for instance, like broccoli sprouts, that's a big one that's high in these things, that you can develop a stronger immune system, right? Which theoretically could work, theoretically, right? But for people that are sensitive, some people are very sensitive to these plant toxins, it doesn't work that way. It just throws them off, right? And by the way, lectins don't work that way at all. It's more like the other ones, like the cruciferous vegetables, like the broccoli and things like that. So most people can eat broccoli and broccoli sprouts and cauliflower, and it probably won't affect them. It's no big deal. Some people, they cut those things out and they immediately like become different people. So like basically Michaela Peterson, she eventually cut all the vegetables out and she went off all of her depression medication. She's like totally, her anxiety's gone, depression's gone. She's no longer on any pain medication. And this all had to do with these plant toxins. So the idea that you can eat some kind of like, you can eat a salad and you think you're getting all those vegetables, those nutrients. It's not true. Like you're gonna get some, yes, but it depends on what you ate in that salad and in what amounts. Depends on what happens. Also, just like anything, the dose makes the poison. You can eat a little bit of poison and it won't kill you, right? And it might make you stronger. But everybody has a different tolerance to different types of poisons. And understand that. Also, fiber is completely fake news. So the idea that you need fiber to have bowel movements is just totally inaccurate. Fiber is not a nutrient. It does not get absorbed by your body. It goes into your bowels. Your bowels ferment it, right? Your gut microbiome ferments them. They eat it, right? It can have some benefits for people who are on a mixed diet, for sure. But if you're on a low carb diet, right? You don't need it. In fact, when I go really, really low carb sometimes, I mean, yeah, do I go to the bathroom as often? No, but my bathroom is like the best it ever is because I don't have to deal with like any of the, think about what fiber does. I'm not trying to be gross here, right? But basically, have you ever used psyllium husk or something like that?
Yeah, yeah.
What happens when you introduce water to it?
Oh, it swells up.
Okay, think about how small your bowels are, okay? All right, when you consume a lot of fiber, okay, it does the same thing, okay? So that is like, yes, you're gonna have more bowel movements, right? Because like your body is trying to flush this stuff out of your system for the most part, okay? So your body's like, hey, it's getting clogged up, we gotta flush it through. So you have a lot of bowel movements. But for some people, a lot of fiber can cause intestinal problems. It can cause a lot of issues, right? So that's why I'm not suggesting never to eat fiber. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that overconsumption of these things like they tell us to do is just crazy. Like having high fiber cereals for breakfast, which is full of sugar and fiber, is supposed to be healthy for you. It's just, for what? Like I've gone weeks and weeks without eating any fiber this year. I have the best bowel movements like ever, because there's no pain, there's nothing. It's just soft and perfect. So anyway, yeah, maybe I don't go all the time, but you don't need to go all the time if you're not eating fiber all the time. So there's that. I don't want to get into bowel movements. I'm sorry, I don't know how we got. The point is, the idea of vitamins, right? Understand that the RDAs are not really based off of science. And two, they were made, even the not science, for people who are eating standard American diet for the most part. Okay, that's number one. So number 2 is, like, for instance, they say if you don't get vitamin C, you're going to get scurvy, right? That's something that you hear people say. That's just nonsense. Like, do you know that this might blow your mind, so get ready, okay? Because you've been told this your whole life, all right? So get ready for this. Do you know that vitamin C absorption and glucose absorption are basically get absorbed by the same inhibitor, meaning that vitamin C and glucose compete for the same spot to be absorbed. Meaning both can't get through, I'm gonna make it real simple, can't get through the same door. I want you to think about that and think about that you drink orange juice for vitamin C. And what is orange juice full of?
It's homogeneous.
Okay, so orange juice, even in its natural state, when you strip the fiber out, particularly though, right? Because the juice doesn't have a lot of fiber. You mainly remove most of the fiber, right? So even when it's not have added sugar, it is high in natural sugar and fructose, right? And glucose, which, okay, fine, you want to drink that, but don't think you're going to absorb all that vitamin C. In fact, you're probably not absorbing much of it at all. Give me an example. So because the sugar and vitamin C compete. So what they're finding is people on very low carbohydrate diets have almost no requirement for consuming vitamin C, because what happens is when you don't consume sugar, your body just, whatever vitamin C you have, whatever trace amounts, it just stores it and uses it. So what they're finding is the more sugar and carbs you consume, the more vitamin C you need. It's like that way with a lot of vitamins. So it's kind of amazing how even steak, if you look at a nutritional label, it will say 0 vitamin C. But the truth is that nutritional testing was done in the US. In Europe, their nutritional testing, they do show vitamin C in muscle meat, okay? Just small amounts. So what that tells you is people that eat steaks all day, like Michaela Peterson and butter, she's been doing this for years. She gets her blood work back. All of her stuff is in normal ranges. How do you explain it? Okay. It's because your body is really smart. And when you don't put the stuff that's blocking the absorption of these things in your body, it can actually use the stuff and store it and use it up. So again, a lot of people say this and they just say, Troy said never to eat vegetables. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that what we necessarily think are the best things for us, we have to understand what they do inside your body and how they work, okay? And then say, okay, now I know, should I consume kale smoothies all day? I don't know, it's kind of high in oxalates. Is that what I want to be consuming all day? Probably not. Does that mean that you can't eat a kale salad? No, that's my point. It's just about understanding like, okay, I should eat foods that are does this kale have nutrients? Yes, it does. So having a kale salad is not a bad idea. Juicing a bunch of kale every day, I would consider a bad idea. That's what I'm saying. It's just about understanding like overdoing things, what's healthy, what isn't, and all that, right? That's all. And lectins, but anything with lectins, you really want to not overdo those things, right? And particularly wheat. I mean, you're on keto anyway, you don't eat wheat mostly anyway, so that's fine. But like peanuts have a lot of lectins. So what I mean is like, would I eat peanut butter every day? Probably not. Will I ever eat peanut butter? Yes, I love peanut butter. That's my point. It's really about, it's not about a rule. You know what I mean? It's more about understanding what these things are.
Right. So what vegetables don't have lectins?
Lectins. Well, here's the shocking thing. All vegetables have some form of anti-nutrient. Yeah. Yes, because all vegetables and fruits, by the way, but fruits are less actually, because fruits and vegetables are very different in the way that they survive. So fruits rely on, generally, on animals consuming them, defecating them out in order to spread their seed, okay, across the land to survive, okay? This is how it works. So fruits are a bit different because actually green vegetables don't want to be eaten. So that's why they develop all these natural defense mechanisms. Fruits, though, do want to be eaten because that's how their species survives. Okay? So what they do is, this is just amazing the way this is designed.
I know.
What fruits do is, they do things that attract mammals to consume them, meaning bright colors, sugar, sweets, right? So all of sugar, like sugar-based things, fructose, which is high sweetener, right, is found in fruits, right, which is mostly fructose and some glucose. Also, our sugar alcohols like erythritol, allulose, these other sugar alcohols are all from fruits. They're derived from fruits, right?
Okay.
So all fruits are packed full of sugars and sugar alcohols and are bright colors to attract mammals to come consume them so they can craft them out. Okay? Because that is how the fruits survive. That's how their species survives. So understanding that is that fruits want you to consume them as much as possible. And if you think about it, fruits are the ones that are addicting, not the vegetables. It's the compounds in fruits that are addicting, right? Am I suggesting that if you have an orange, you're going to be addicted to it? No. I'm suggesting that the compounds inside of that orange are addictive on their own if consumed too much, right? Like fructose, for example, or glucose. So what the processed food industry does is they take that natural thing and then they abuse it, of course, right? So because they know it's addicting on its own. So this is the natural way of life. Animals don't want to be eaten, and neither do plants. Yet, in order for us to survive, something's got to die. Just like in order for animals to survive, something's got to die. That's the way of life. And when we try to pretend like agriculture doesn't kill animals either, that's total nonsense. You know, like when, in order to produce crops, right, like soybeans, for example, which is the basis of like everything in modern food is soy. Like soybean oil, soy this, soy that, right? You know how many times they got to reuse the same plot of land, first of all, right? So what they do is they till the land, they put all these, think about it, the plants have natural insecticides, so, but they're not good enough, right, for the food industry. So what do? They put Roundup and all these chemicals on it, which you also consume when you consume vegetables too. But I'm not even talking about the actual man-made contaminants, right? You consume that stuff on top of it, right? And what does that do? That seeps down into the soil and kills everything in the soil, right? Basically, all the insects, all the stuff, it kills that. It kills everything off, okay? And then they keep reusing the soil. They keep poisoning it. And eventually the soil becomes what? It becomes useless. And they have to move on to another plot of land. All right. So one, that tells you that's a bit unsustainable forever. Okay, number one. Number two, every time they use those machines for the agriculture, they kill literally thousands of rodents and birds and insects. I mean, I'm talking about, it was just in Australia, there was a thing that came out that they killed 40,000 mice in a year. Just in a one farm in Australia alone, they counted, okay? So the point is, where do we draw the line when it comes to what life is valuable and what isn't, right? It's just like, it's an interesting ethical debate. I don't have the answer for you. All I can tell you is that if you were to eat, and I'm not defending factory farming either, by the way, it's horrific, right? What they do to these cows and everything. But if you were to eat grass-fed cows, right? Which is what I mainly eat. Grass-fed cows are just roaming around the grass, right? Eating grass. That's what they do, okay? Now, they eat the grass because, I don't know if you know this, but ruminants like cows and bison, they have multiple stomachs, and what they do is they can convert plant matter into fat where human beings cannot, okay? So when they eat grass, they get fat actually, right, on their body. That's how you get ribeye and everything else, because their body converts grass into fat. It's quite an amazing thing actually. Human beings cannot do that. We cannot convert anything into fat. We can only, well, that's not true. Our body can convert sugar into fat. That is true. Yeah. Okay. So it can do that, right? But it's not going to convert grass or broccoli into fat. I'll tell you that much, right? So that's number one. So cows are really amazing. Ruminants are kind of amazing creatures because they can convert these grass into protein and fat through their multiple stomach system. It's quite amazing. So if you were to eat like a grass-fed cow, one life, right? One person can, if you were to eat that cow, all of it, I'm talking about all the muscle, all the liver, the brains, the whole shebang, right? How our ancestors used to eat these animals. You can survive potentially for like one person for like a year off of one life being.
That's good.
So you can't tell me that like that way of living, actually eating animals in that sense, eating grass-fed meats, right, actually kills a lot less life than agriculture does. Between the insects and the rodents and the birds and everything else, and the plants that you're killing too on top of it. So the point is, this co-concept that vegans have that they're doing some great thing for animals is really not true. Like, so yes, is factory farming bad? It definitely is. It's unnatural. We shouldn't be doing that to animals. We shouldn't be feeding them soy and corn like they feed them, right? It's terrible. So, but I understand it's expensive. So I would say it's better to consume that, to consume junk food for sure, because it's still nutrient dense for sure. But is it as healthy for you as grass-fed meats? No. Is it sustainable for life? No, right? So you just understand that if you can buy grass-fed meats, try to do that, you know, because it is better for you naturally, and it's better for the animals too, right? So there's that part of it. But yeah, this concept that it's also better for the environment, this is nonsense. There's just like a lot of fake news out there. So yeah, so point is, eat steak and eggs and be healthy. Eggs are like the pasture raised eggs are do you know the difference between pasture raised eggs and cage free eggs and free range eggs? Does anybody know the difference?
This is really good. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Again, remember how they said they try to pull the wool over your eyes and trick you? Okay. Here's another example. All right. You have regular eggs, which are basically just, they put all these chickens in a big factory, right? And they're all living on top of each other, like crapping on each other, and they have no room to move, and it's just disgusting. Okay. And they treat them like just garbage. Okay. So it's nasty. Okay. Now, is there any nutrition in that? Yes. Okay. I'm not suggesting that there's no nutrition in regular eggs. There is. So if you eat regular eggs, you're going to get some nutrition. I'm not saying there isn't, but understand that it's terrible for the chickens, and the nutrition you get is really not that much. It's compared to a real egg. Then you have cage free. Do you know what that means? That means that inside the factory, they don't keep them in a cage. They just let them sit on top of each other. That's all that means. They're still inside the same factory. They're still bunched up. They're just not bunched up inside of a cage. It's the only difference. They're still fed the same crap. They're fed soy and corn and stuff that chickens would never eat in the wild. So what do chickens eat? Does anybody know?
Worms.
Yeah, they eat insects and worms. That's what they eat. They're basically carnivores for the most part, naturally. Okay.
Yeah.
So what does the factory farmers feed them? Soy and corn. Okay. They would never eat that stuff, and it makes them fat. And we get fat chickens, which taste really good, right? Okay. But they're not naturally that fat, number one. Number two, they give them all that stuff, fattens them up, they make a bunch of eggs. The eggs got the crap in them too. Number one. So cage-free is no different than just regular eggs, all right? Number three, free range. All right, you know what that means? That means that inside the factory, they illegally have to open a door, okay? One door that allows the chickens to go outside. But here's the thing. Chickens don't go outside because chickens stay in flocks, basically. So the farmers know this. So what they do is there's a little doggy door. You can look this stuff up on YouTube how they do it. There's like a little doggy door. They open, right? The chickens don't go anywhere. They just stay in there. The food's sitting there, right? They're not going anywhere. They're getting fed. They're all together, okay? They're eating the same crap as the regular chickens. Guess what they label it? Free range, because the chickens had access to the outside. Okay? Again, they're so corrupt, it's like mind-blowing. So the last one is called pasture-raised. In order for something to be labeled pasture-raised, in order for something to be labeled pasture-raised, it actually has to eat off of a real green pasture, meaning it's going around, it's eating eggs, and it's eating bugs and worms and everything else, right? That's the difference. So if you buy eggs, buy pasture-raised eggs if you can afford them. Are they a couple of hours more? Yes, but their return on the investment is night and day, because you're actually eating real eggs as compared to just processed junk, like just chickens that are living like in their own feces, eating corn and soy. That's all they're doing.
Yeah, and Troy, and it's
Yeah.
true because the first time that, well, when I had saw that in his refrigerator and I was using it, the color of the yellow is like a deep gold. I mean, it's even the color of the yolk is so much, it's a real rich color and you can taste the difference. So that's all we're buying now. I mean, you can get them at ShopRite. Yeah.
What brand do you buy? Nellie's?
No, we thought we were buying Nellie's, but Troy, it's not Nellie's. What brand is it?
It has to say the word. It has to say pasture raised. If it doesn't
I have
say,
a picture on my phone.
no good.
Organic.
All organic means that this is a funny trick they do. If it's not pasture raised, okay, there's a difference between organic pasture raised and just organic eggs, okay? Regular organic eggs, cage-free, free range, all that means is the soy and corn they're feeding them are organic. That's all it means. Okay.
I was too, and I thought I was doing good until you told me. I have a picture on my thing. Can you throw my phone down? Not throw it, but kind of, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, see, they're not. And I'll show you. Hold on 1 second.
It's like that, like brown with the little.
And it says on there, it has right on there. I took a